Inside Tennessee, we're talking money in college sports, NIL deals, collectives. John, we've learned a lot. We're also learning the thoughts of Congress and whether they're going to step in and do any regulation.
The landscape's changing so quickly, I think, that Congress suddenly is waking up and realizing, hey, maybe we need more regulation or we need more protections for our young athletes, for better or for worse. But again, as I say, things have been happening so quickly, I think they're still sort of trying to get their feet on the ground. Last week, Chuck Fleischman, who is an East Tennessee congressman, was in town, and so we thought that would be a great opportunity to ask him if he thought this was the point he should do something.
I trust the University of Tennessee. They want what is best for student athletes. It's a very complex set of circumstances. I'm going to continue to follow the University of Tennessee's lead as a key constituent to make sure that I do the right thing in Congress.
And Congressman Fleischman saying he thinks it's up to the University of Tennessee to make those decisions. Hunter, I asked you in the break if there's anything else we should be talking about. Let's talk about the outreach you mentioned going across all sports and trying to reach both female and male athletes.
Yeah, one of the things that we're really proud of is from the beginning we felt like NIL was for everybody. Men's and women's, especially given the resources and the fans and the donor support that we have here. And so we've worked with, across 12 different sports, men's and women's, and it's been really cool to see the local business community step up and support some of these programs that maybe don't receive as much notoriety.
Well, let's talk about that. I think most people think that it's just local big donors, and we all know who they are. You talked about a membership in the volunteer club, and you all are, like I saw a bat you're auctioned off that had Peyton and Tony Vitello's signatures on it. But do you also reach out to the big boys in the national world, the McDonald's, the Nikes, the Crocs, the whoever's, and are they supportive at this point in time of the university?
Yeah, so in the beginning, whether it's national businesses or local businesses, they didn't know if it
would
was
work.
allowed or was it legal, yeah, and so forth. Going into year 4, that's a priority of us to try to find more what I would call traditional marketing partners, whether it's national companies such as McDonald's or Force Factor or Hyatt hotels, and more. More and more as people understand that they can get an ROI, especially locally on their business, and also help student athletes in the school, I think you're going to see more buy-in.
But you have more, I would say you have more local, like I know cookie companies,
right,
that have signed some of our athletes that are local, and the kids go out there and sign autographs, and it's great. Right. But you do have a lot of local businesses that have bought in.
We do, and again, that's a priority for us, to continue to grow that, and I think that'll happen naturally.
Yeah, Hunter, so I'm curious, with again, being kind of Wild West, we're still trying to figure out how it eventually all gets regulated. There's not currently an ability for players and athletes to have any sort of collective bargaining agreement. Mm-hmm. And as a result, the NIL space could have a lot of people who don't have fiduciary responsibilities to the athletes. I don't think you guys are handling it that way. I think you're the model for how to go about creating and building a successful NIL. But where do you see that kind of responsibility to the athletes coming into play and being worked into the framework of regulation going forward?
Well, for one, we have individual contracts with each player that we work with. But in terms of regulation, collective bargaining, I think we're several steps away from that. I know you're going to touch on the House case, but I think there's several dominoes that'll fall before we really get to those conversations.
John, it's worth mentioning that. Why don't you give us some background on that and our viewers some perspective on the significance of the House case? So,
yeah, it would appear that 3 antitrust cases out of Northern California, at least one of them, are about to be resolved. The announcement came down roughly a month ago. There are some major prongs to that. One is more than $2.5 billion would be going back sort of as retro pay to athletes, college athletes, dating to about 2016. So Josh Dobbs, if you're watching, congratulations. You're probably going to get a little money.
I don't know if he needs it, but
well, it won't hurt. Him being a science guy, maybe it gets him airfare up to the space station.
There you go.
Another, and this is really, I think, going to be the most significant, the colleges will have the opportunity, it's not mandatory, they will have the opportunity to make $20 million, I think, available to their college athletes. That's really going to be significant. And that seems like there might be a question there if that bumps up against NIL collectives as they exist. And then there's a third sort of resolution. So, but this is all, honestly, it's not overstating it to say it's revolutionary.
Hunter, how young does this start? Are you looking at, and are other collectives looking at kids in junior high?
Probably not that early. It could get to that, but there are some states that allow prospective student athletes to do NIL deals now. That is still very much in its infancy, stages.
And to Ramsey's point, we hear from critics that young musicians may sign a deal with a record company that signs away everything when they're young because they're unproven. What do you say to critics who may say, hey, we're taking advantage of young people at an early stage in their lives when maybe their decision making isn't so great?
Well, I can't speak to the music industry. That's out of my realm. But our contracts, they have finite years on them. It ends at a point. But I think there's a misconception of what the players are really doing with the money. Mm-hmm. And you'll see down in Georgia, Lamborghini pops up. But the vast majority of these players are sending the money back home mm-hmm. to take care of some bills or maybe take care of some sick family members. And a lot of them are, quite frankly, saving the money. I mean, there's a crazy stat that X amount of NFL players, I think it's like 80%, go broke, and these players, they realize that, and so they're being smart, with their money. And
do you all give them tax advice?
We do. Yeah. We do not.
You don't. Does the university do that?
Do you offer any sort of financial planning advice or curriculum for them?
What we do, if they ask any of those questions, we try to point them in the direction of 3 to 5 reputable firms and kind of let the family vet and make those decisions.
Do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
I think everybody's concerned about the transfer portal.
Yeah.
If it comes in-house and there are contracts with the athletes per se and they become employees, I assume the transfer portal might be taken care of. On your contract, is there anything at all about requiring you to play in a bowl game?
We cannot have that in our contracts, and it's interesting you brought that up about the portal. I think when people say Wild Wild West, they kind of view the portal, and I think there's a partial solution to that, and that would be if there was some sort of sports agent registry. Mm-hmm. If you want to and I'll keep going back to the NFL, but if you want to be an NFL agent, there's a process you have to go through. You have to pass a background check. You have to take a test. You have to have a postgraduate degree in something. You have to register in each state you want to recruit a player and pay that fee. So there are some barriers to entry. In the NIL world, anybody can be an NIL agent. Mm-hmm. And the only way they make a commission is if they get a player to go into a portal and he gets a deal with another school. And unfortunately,
that's what's happening.
60% of players go into the portal and don't find a home. And so I think if there was some sort of regulation, it wouldn't solve all the problems, but it would definitely reel in.
That's the exact same. That's what came from the collective bargaining agreement. You see that in the NBA and the NFL as a result of collective bargaining. So I agree with you on that point, though.
Hunter, we're going to leave it there. We appreciate your time. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Spyre Sports, you can read about them online. We'll be back with our talk around right after this.